interview with Lara Smith about her group, the Liberal Gun Club, plus a look at the latest NRA turmoil. That and more on this episode of the Weekly Reload Podcast.
I made the devil run. I gave him poison just for fun.
All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Weekly Reload Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Gutowski. I am also the founder of the Reload.com. You know, usually I do that intro so well, it just goes straight through, but not today. I've got national spokesperson for the Liberal Gun Club, Lara Smith, here on the podcast this week to tell us a little bit about their organization and what they are and how they're different. Some of it's obviously in the name, but Lara, if you could just introduce yourself briefly to people who might not know you.
Sure. And thank you for having me, as always. I am Lara Smith. I'm the national spokesperson for the Liberal Gun Club. And we are one of the biggest and longest established left of center organizations that support the Second Amendment. Our take is a little bit different. Our focus is root cause mitigation more than particularly fighting established gun laws. Our focus is more, look, if we want to get anything done, we have to focus on the underlying causes of what's happening and underlying causes of violence in general and societal issues. So that's our focus more. But we also have training. We have online forums. We have, an open space for left of center gun owners to come and talk about firearms and firearm ownership and the fun parts of that too.
And so, I think a lot of people would be surprised at, the existence of a liberal gun club, right? There's certainly a stereotype about the kind of people who own guns in the United States. And
Sure.
There's a lot of polarization around the issue of guns in the United States. And liberals tend to find themselves on the side that wants to restrict gun ownership. And so that's obviously where you guys tend to differ often with your fellow liberals, right? In that sense, like you're politically aligned in a lot of other ways, but not on this particular issue. Is that right?
That's right. I mean, so one of the things we talk about in the club and one of kind of the phrases we use is every single civil right for every single person. We kind of think the liberal philosophy is that you have to protect all the civil rights, even the ones that you don't necessarily like. For a lot of liberals, we think the Democratic Party's focus on the Second Amendment is just wrong. Although, to some extent, I understand it. If you're getting your data from one place and the data is bad, then your focus is going to be bad, right? So there's a lot of that. And so a lot of what we do is try to say, hey, look, we have the same concern. I mean, there's nobody who says, oh, yeah, we're totally fine with kids being hurt or people committing suicide or harms or violence in the communities or whatever. That's not what we're saying. And really no one's saying that, right? And so we have a lot of problem with kind of the rhetoric that goes with that. But our response to that is giving the benefit of the doubt, even if they were well-intentioned laws, they don't work. We know that these kind of restrictive, focused on the gun laws don't do anything. So our focus is, what's the actual problem, right? The actual problem isn't the million of gun owners in the United States that use guns every day, that use guns safely every day, right? And it's certainly not the people who properly and legally use guns in defensive situations. The problem is a very, very small subset of people. There's people with mental health issues. There's people with community issues. There's underlying societal problems that create violence in general in the United States. And our focus is, how do we look at those problems holistically? Because even if, poof, all of the guns disappeared tomorrow, you wouldn't solve those problems. Mm-hmm. We'd have another tool that replaced it, right? And so our focus is, how do we actually make life better so that the tool that's out there that primarily gets used responsibly is always used responsibly or has more opportunity for that, and that being the focus.
Right. And I suppose in that way, you do share a lot of common ground with other liberal groups that want to address these sort of root cause issues, as you call them, with
Right.
social programs and things of that nature, as opposed to gun bans. That sounds like that's how I understand what you guys are trying to do, at least in the political front, right?
Right. And so to that end, right, I mean, the political front of it is, we know, I mean, there's plenty of data, there's tons and tons of studies that talk about what laws work and what laws don't, right? I mean, in general, bans don't work. And obviously that's been a big discussion in the United States this week, right? But bans don't work for everything. And the one thing that we point to a lot is the war on drugs. I mean, that everyone knows that's been an unmitigated disaster, because you can't just stop the thing, you have to stop why it's happening. And so that's more our focus. But also our focus is, well, why do that? Like, why have that? Well, because it's in the Bill of Rights, and we don't want to see the Bill of Rights restricted. So because we don't want the other liberal social agendas to be restricted, right? And if you restrict the Bill of Rights, that's what happens.
Okay. And, you mentioned the idea of defending all the civil liberties, the civil rights, even the ones you don't like. But obviously, I've spent time shooting with members from your group, and I've met a number of them, and you guys do really like guns, certainly.
Oh yeah,
as well. It's not just a principles thing about defending the Bill of Rights or civil rights generally. It's, you also genuinely have a group of people that are left of center, even relatively, to the far left almost, in cases, but they are gun owners who genuinely enjoy owning guns. They own them for all sorts of different reasons, right? Hobby. They like the hobby of it, but they also like the self-defense aspect, which
sure.
Doesn't get talked about as much on the left side of the issue, but is certainly something that a lot of Democrats and liberals who own guns believe in as well. And it's, can you just talk a little bit about the community that you guys have built over these last several years of people who perhaps, I don't know, don't feel like they fit into the broader gun culture, or aren't NRA card carrying members, and then maybe also don't fit in perhaps on the left in the terms of wanting to ban guns and so forth.
Right. I mean, I would say most of our members say that we don't fit in to any particular box. Most of our members are probably not aligned with any political party. I would say most of our members are independent. If they may register for a party to vote in primaries, but they wouldn't say, oh yeah, I affiliate with a party. I mean, like me, I didn't, when I lived in a state that had open primaries, I wasn't registered to a party because it didn't fit me. I didn't ever side, 100% on this or 100% on that. Having said that, there's kind of the joke, the further left you go, the you get your guns back. So our community, we have a lot of people who are really, I kind of joke that we have everything from libertarians to anarchists in the group. And it's true. Like when we say left of center, we mean the whole broad spectrum of left of center. But the group is really fun. I mean, we have a lot of events. As a matter of fact, to be a voting member, to vote for your chapter leadership and that kind of thing, you actually have to come to an event. It can be online with COVID. We do have online events, but you have to actively participate in the club, and we have to know you're a gun owner. You can't just come in and be like, oh, I like this, and be a voting member. Now you can be a member. You don't have to own firearms to be a member. And we have lots of members who came in saying, with the things that are going on politically, or the things that are going on in the world or my community, I want to learn about being armed. I feel the need to learn self-defense, but I don't want to go to the kind of stereotypical tact dude, when I'm not teaching gun classes, I'm a mercenary guy down the street.
Right.
To get that. I'm not comfortable with that, either because I don't align with that politically, or I have some characteristic that I think makes me stand out, or I'm not comfortable with them. Can you guys teach me? And we say, yeah, you bet. We teach all kinds of people firearms, and we teach everything from the basic intro beginner class to defensive use of firearms. We have a defensive class that we have certified instructors. We have classes that are certified for carry classes in Massachusetts and other states. If you need to take a class in your state to get a concealed carry license, you can use one of ours in some states. And we're working on getting it in others. It's actually really hard to do that, by the way, which is an interesting problem that a lot of people don't know. Like, it's really difficult to get those certified.
Certainly.
But to the extent we can do it, we do. And we have events. And then the other thing is we like to have fun events. We like to have people come out. We have one in California every year where people from Northern California and Southern California meet on the Central California coast. And we go to a great range there called San Luis Obispo Sportsmen's Association. And we go and we shoot everything from muzzle loaders to the newest shotguns you can imagine, to every type of wheel gun, to, your basic polymer guns, to your very fancy, custom handguns. And we, and everybody brings their stuff, and it's really fun because you go to the range and we'll all be set out on, especially they have a close target steel range there. And they have a bench that's just a really long bench to set up on it and to shoot the steel for that side of the range. And everybody from the club will have their firearms out. And invariably, other people are coming over going, what's that? Wait, what? Can I? I've never seen one of those in person. Can I try that? And it's great, and we get the, who are you guys? You're the who? The what?
Right.
And, we get a lot of introduction to people because we're out there with this huge, huge variety of firearms having fun. I mean, this, when we have our national, we try to do all kinds of different events. We'll go and we'll have a shotgun day, and we'll go. And if we're somewhere we can do it, like we're going to Vegas this year, we'll set up a machine gun shoot. We'll go, we'll have that for our members.
Yeah. I was at the one in Florida. We went to Machine Gun America, the great machine gun range there. But yeah, I mean, I think what I noticed spending time with the Liberal Gun Club, with you guys at your national convention a couple of years back, is that you've been able to create this sort of pretty close-knit community of people who perhaps don't feel like they're as welcomed in some parts of the gun owning community, like you described there. There's obviously a polarization in this country around firearms where it's even moved into a sort of an identity politics area where owning firearms is connected to being, conservative Republican, and being against firearms or being for restrictions on them is associated with being a liberal Democrat. And clearly, your group doesn't necessarily fit that simplistic sort of divide that, is the stereotypical divide. And so it's interesting to see how you guys have been able to really build this community over years, and that it's, grown to the size that it has, where you have chapters, all over the country now, and you move your national meeting from state to state each year. I mean, obviously COVID has impacted that recently, but like you said, you're doing Vegas here soon, and I think it's fascinating to see what you guys have been able to carve out in that area now. And is it growing? Are you seeing sort of more people coming in?
Yeah, and we do see more people coming in. Really, I think the big upsurge in growth was kind of the beginning of the Trump administration, but since then that growth has been really steady, and we see more young people coming in. We see more diversity of people coming in. I'd say in the past year, probably the largest growth has been in the Asian community that we've seen come in, but we have all kinds of members. We have a huge, huge variety of people all over the country who have come in. And one of the things we talk about is that, we want to be welcoming for everybody. Like, you don't actually have to be a liberal to be a member. You just have to understand that that's who the club was created for and by and is run by. And we want people who come in who want to have fun and who want to interact with us in a way that's going to be polite and fun. But we're not the gun club where you're going to come in and start talking about these other issues that may be kind of the more conservative Republican darling issues and have that met comfortably, because this is really a group of leftists. But I will say, I mean, for example, Beto O'Rourke gets zero love from our organization. Gavin Newsom, I mean, none.
Yeah. Actually, there's another thing I noticed spending time with liberal gun club members was that, certainly there can be discomfort with that sort of stereotypical, conservative Republican gun owner or whatever. But usually there's actually more conflict with, fellow liberals who don't believe in gun rights. It seems like I remember one member telling me that they'd be more afraid to tell their liberal friends that they're gun owners than their gun owning friends that they're liberal. Do you think that follows?
I think it depends on who you are and where you are. I mean, I think for example, for some of our disabled members, or especially some of our members of color, I think, they don't tell people they're gun owners ever because they don't think it's safe. But yeah, I mean, I think for a big majority of our members, they also don't talk to their liberal friends about, yeah, I'm a gun owner. I'm kind of the exception to that, and a lot of the leadership, obviously.
Sure.
I mean, it's pretty out there that we own firearms and we offer to take people to the range. But we do talk about that. And that's one of the things the club talks about with the membership is, that's fine. Like, lots of people who are gun owners don't talk about it, and that's fine. Like that, that's not an abnormal thing. But, I love David Yamane's thing about guns are normal. I mean, they really are normal. People, more than a third of Americans own them. It's normal.
Yeah.
But it's normal for liberals too, right? I mean, something like even before this surge that we know has happened since 2020, I think it was right around somewhere between a fifth and a quarter of all, of all liberals said, yeah, I live in a house with a gun, or we own one. I mean, it's normal for everybody. But it is true. Like our membership definitely calls the Democratic Party out on it. And the way you see that the most, right, is in primary voting for us.
Interesting.
For sure.
Yeah. And I guess going off of that, by the way, we had Professor Yamane on the podcast a few months back. Yeah. People want to check out more of his thoughts, because I think you're right. One thing that gets really undervalued in our discussion about guns is just how many people own them, and how those people cut across all sorts of different ideological or race or gender lines, and they own them for all kinds of different reasons. There's a lot of reasons you might want to own a gun. 2020 is sort of a good example of this. There was obviously a surge of gun buying after the pandemic, but interestingly, there was a big surge surrounding, the rioting but before that, the actual murder of George Floyd that later, inspired this protests and then rioting. So there are people buying guns because of what happened with George Floyd, seeing a police officer, murder a black man that way, made, I'm sure, plenty of black people want to buy guns. And then, the rioting inspired people to buy guns, including, I'm sure, black people in those neighborhoods that were affected by that, but also people all over the country. So, even the same event on either side of it can push people to go and purchase firearms. And so, it's something that doesn't get discussed as much until we talk about a group like yours, of this sort of stereotype breaking group, where it's, the simplistic thing is to say that all liberals hate guns or all conservatives love guns, which is also not true, of course. But it's more important to understand the reality of America, people in America. Gun ownership is much broader than I think we ever really talk about.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, I mean, you're even seeing in Florida, is it the Secretary of Agriculture who's
Yep.
the statewide elected Democrat who filed
Nikki
the
Fried.
suit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you see that and you're realizing like maybe there's little things. I mean, there's a Democrat running for sheriff in San Diego County who's pro concealed carry permits. And so in California, the sheriffs in general are the ones who issue concealed carry permits,
Right.
and so they have a lot of power on whether you get it, and it's county by county. He's a Democrat. He's absolutely liberal. I know him, and he's absolutely pro. He's like no, and as a matter of fact, he ran in the last election, and it forced the conservative sheriff to start issuing them.
Mm-hmm.
He moved because a Democrat said, "No, I'm going to issue these. You're wrong."
And I guess going off of that, there's two interesting points here. One is the first one I want to talk about is just this influx of new gun owners over the last 2 years, right? That was just alluding to earlier. A lot of these people tend to be from demographics that traditionally are more liberal. They vote more Democratic. You have a lot more minorities, a lot more women buying guns now. And that has only accelerated over those last 2 years. And, it's one, have you seen, I mean, it sounds like you've seen some of that effect in your own group, as you were
Mm-hmm.
discussing earlier, and more Asian Americans joining. But to me, that signals, one of the big long-term trend stories, because how those people end up voting on guns down the line is going to determine a lot about how gun politics play out over the next several decades, I think. I think the initial reaction from a lot of gun owners or gun rights activists, especially on the Republican side of things, was that these people who bought guns for the first time in 2020 were going to immediately become single issue gun voters, and they were going to go out and vote party line Republican, and Donald Trump was guaranteed to be reelected. Obviously that didn't happen. And I've always thought that the more realistic view of what will happen with these folks is that they're not necessarily going to change their entire political identity just because they became gun owners. They're not necessarily going to change their position on abortion or, Medicare or
Right.
universal health care, whatever else, just because they bought a gun, but they might change their views on guns, right? That would follow, certainly. And we have seen surveys that show that effect already. The University of Chicago put out a survey that showed people who bought guns over the last 2 years, in some cases, were actually more in favor of loosening some restrictions than previous owners, especially around things like waiting lists, probably because they had to interact with waiting lists at a moment where they were very eager to buy a gun for their own protection.
Right.
And so it seems that it might have an even bigger effect just on the Democratic Party in particular, in becoming more amenable towards gun rights and running more candidates or at least candidates who run with a more amenable attitude towards guns may do better in the future. You think that's sort of in line with what you're just talking about there?
Yeah. So if you look at John Ossoff's campaign in Georgia, the senator, there was nothing about guns on his page ever. Now, how does he vote on it? Once you get into Congress, does your vote change because there's party politics going on? Sure, maybe. But he knew that he would never win if in Georgia, of all states, if he put up an anti-gun. He knew he couldn't be Beto, right? I mean, so first of all, Beto lost Texas because he was anti-gun. I mean, that's why he lost Texas. If he had been pro-gun, he would have been able to pull in more people. And so what happens is if you have that stance, right, it's not that you're going to go vote. It's not that those voters are going to suddenly vote for the Republican. It's that they're going to stay home. So that what happens is it suppresses the vote on one side, and it doesn't raise it on the other, but suppresses it on one side. So that's a different thing than gaining voters for the other side.
So you think we're already seeing this effect in
I do.
situations like Nikki Fried in Florida or John Ossoff in Georgia and
I mean,
Beto's campaign?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, Beto's backed off some of the anti-gun stuff this year compared to what his campaign was the last time. I mean, you're starting to see, you're even though to gun people, it's not enough of a change, and I get that. Like, I don't like well, I'm pro-gun, but I want to do XYZ thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and mostly it's I want to ban ARs, but I'm totally fine if you own handguns. Well, why? Let's talk about the numbers. That makes no sense, right? And so I understand like gun people saying it's not just enough to not talk about it. I get it, but you're still starting to see that change in the Democratic Party in small ways. Now there's so much money involved, right? There's so much money on both sides, right? Involved in what's the position going to be, that you're not going to see that change immediately, but you are seeing it in the voting. You are seeing it in who's coming out. You're seeing it in things like even in Oakland, there's somebody running for city council in Oakland who is Democratic and pro-gun in Oakland, California, of all places. I mean, this is a city that's like, you know, the police department is under a federal like order to be managed. It's like that is the last city in the world that you think you'd see that. And you've got somebody running. You're starting to see it. You're seeing it in people who are running for lower down positions, right? You're seeing a lot more people saying, hey, I want to talk about this. You're seeing it in more organizations that are set up to reach a broader group of people, not just ours, but things like NAAGA, things like Walk the Talk America, right? That's a non-political gun organization that their whole focus is talking to doctors. Again, that's not necessarily a really liberal group of people that they're reaching out to, but it's definitely a group that had been anti-gun for a very long time. And they're going out there and talking to them. So you're starting to see it in small ways. So are we going to see it this cycle, right? Like this year? Probably not in as much of an obvious way, but I think we'll see it for really 4 years from now is probably the first cycle we'll really see a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's going to be a longer term effect. You're starting to see a little bit of it now, potentially. Yeah. Obviously, you need a lot more evidence before we can declare it's happened. But right. And it, you know, it's an evolution more than, you know, an instant change, I think. But to the second part of that point, your group in particular seems poised to benefit from this change because the way that you guys lobby. Right. And you do lobby, right? I mean,
we do lobby.
You know, you've done it. I've talked to some of the members here in Virginia about, you know, their efforts at Lobby Day. I mean, specifically, I was talking to David Meyer-Somer and as well as Deborah Yamanica, and right. Very nice people. But they went down as part of Liberal Gun Club Virginia to meet with legislators on Lobby Day in a similar fashion to, you know, what the Virginia Citizens Defense League does, but in the similar fashion in the sense that they are lobbying lawmakers about guns, but they're doing it obviously from a very different point of view and a different approach, which sets you guys apart in the sense that you have more potential credibility with, frankly, with Democrats in these state houses because you share a lot of similar issues in common that you guys believe in, but you know, you're not the NRA and you're not VCDL, you're not these other gun groups that tend to be more conservative, and so they, you know, potentially they listen to you more. Are you seeing a change at all in the last 2 years in that regard? And you know, how do you plan to take advantage of this sort of uptick in membership and this change in who's buying guns?
So, you know, it's been an interesting problem, right? Because the past 2 years, a lot of the state houses have been closed. Like, right. You know, like not necessarily in the conservative states, but those aren't the states that we necessarily need to go lobby in. They're the ones that already have the gun laws that are favorable.
Hmm.
If you're talking about state, right? California, Oregon, a lot of that you haven't been able to go in and have in-person meetings. So it's been difficult, but we've definitely been reaching out more. So let's talk about Virginia. We actually go the same week as Lobby Day, but we don't go the same day.
Right.
We go a different day, and we usually go, I think, the following day or 2 days later.
And that's a way to differentiate a little bit, right?
Exactly. And then we show up, and we don't go usually. I mean, and not because we aren't interested in them, but because it's not the most value, right? We don't already go talk to the more conservative members who are already going to vote on this.
Mm-hmm.
We go and we talk to the Democratic members who maybe have sponsored a bill, or who we've talked to before who have said, I have a question about this bill that's out here. You guys, we've built a lot of trust because we've done it for several years now, and they can come to us and say, hey, can you explain this technical part of this to me? And what we go to the legislators a lot, and to the people and say is like, hey, we understand what you're trying to do. This law is not going to do it. Here's why. And we try to bring the evidence in to say, here's the problem. Or have you thought about, like, there was a bill in Virginia, and I'll tell you, I don't remember exactly the specifics of it, but it was really, really bad. And it was clearly going to harm women who had restraining orders. Like, the whole idea was, and it was a really complicated bill, but part of it was a waiting time thing. And the whole idea was to create more waiting times. But if you had a restraining order, you couldn't have a gun anyway. So the people you were hurting were the women. And there were problems like if a woman got a divorce, she could end up being a target, and all these kind of things the way it was written. And we went in and talked to them and said, this is really poorly done. Here's who's going to get hurt. And here's what we're concerned about. Have you thought about this? And we may not get a whole bill scrapped, but we get it to be not nearly as bad. And we have gotten things scrapped. I think the place this year that frankly we didn't have as much luck was Washington. So when we see, hey, that didn't change, then what that tells us and what we're working on next is, who do we need to go see? So one of the things we've implemented is that we have an intern, and she monitors legislation for us so that we can see, and we have a database that says, we're neutral on this. We don't care. This law isn't going to do anything, or, it's too tangential to guns for us to worry about. Hey, we actually really hey, there's a new law coming, even if it's Republican sponsored. Hey, we like that one. Or, hey, this law is really bad. We're a hard no. We need to think about lobbying on that. So that we have this big database, and so that we can tell our members. So we can send out to our members who, let's say we see something that's really awful. We can send it out to our members and say, hey, who wants to go to the State House? Or, you guys, we have postcards. Send a postcard to your rep about this law. Here's the bill number. Here's what it's about. Here's a blurb about how you can talk to them about it. Let them know you're concerned. You need to email them. Here's the link about how to find out who your representative is. And so we'll do that kind of thing to try to get our membership more engaged in making phone calls and sending emails and sending postcards. Our members can actually order free postcards from us to do mailings. We've done mailings on all kinds of laws. We've done, concerted efforts. When the administration was getting ready to come out, with their gun platform, our membership wrote and said, I'm concerned about this in the gun platform. And then you saw when it came out that, yeah, some of it was terrible, but it also included funding for things like Operation Ceasefire. That was great. And that was one of the things we talked about and put in the postcards was, please work on things that work, such as, and so we're really careful. The way we lobby is not to say, wow, you're really stupid, this is a terrible idea. What we do instead is to say, here's the problem, here's a solution. And try to give a very quick, small solution to it, to get lawmakers thinking about, hey, there might be something else I could do that would be better.
Yeah.
And that's our focus. And now that things are opening back up, I think you're going to see, we're actually probably going to try to fund that more. I'd really love to go do a trip to DC with club members and take people to DC and go do a day of action. and go out and talk to lawmakers and get, appointments. I've done that before. And I'd like to actually go do that at a national level. I think that's probably next.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I'd be interested in following that if you're able to put it together. But I think your group offers something unique because in Virginia, for instance, we had that there was a package of gun control bills that passed here under the former governor when Democrats had control of the state. But even during that period, they were considering a much stricter option of banning assault weapons, or so-called assault weapons, AR-15s and so forth, and even potentially confiscating them or doing a mandatory buyback situation or making it illegal to possess the ones you already had. Right. And so that got blocked by the Democrats in the Senate, people like Chap Peterson. And the NRA and the VCDL certainly played a big role in that. They were able to mobilize a lot of people, a lot of supporters. There's a huge rally in Richmond, and the NRA did a lot of work, with lawmakers in the state house itself. But your group also continues to meet with Chap Peterson and some of these other lawmakers on the Democratic side. And, it seems like there's certainly potential at the very least that could have a significant impact on how they, approach the issue, especially on, the more finite details or, where they might draw the line on what, like in this case, what they're willing to vote for and what they're not. They were willing to vote for something like universal background checks, or local gun-free zones for parks and so forth, which they did pass, but they weren't willing to go the extra step, even when they could have, given Democratic control of the entire state government at that point. And so that's where I could see a group like yours having that sort of additional impact that somebody like the NRA or VCDL, as much as they legitimately did do in that situation, and have done, across the country and at the federal level, there's something that's out of their reach in terms of that kind of influence.
Right. And so it's hard, right? It's hard for groups like the NRA and that kind of thing. They're not going to influence the lawmakers they don't donate to. And they're not going to influence the lawmakers who they frankly spend a lot of time denigrating. And we don't do that, and we try really hard not to do that. You don't see our group doing a lot of that. You certainly don't see it at the state level at all. And even, are there Republican politicians who are not popular in our group? Oh, yeah, for sure. But again, like I said, I think there's as many Democrats who aren't popular. But you see people in our group going in and saying, hey, I'm not coming in to tell you you're an idiot. I'm coming in to tell you, here's why this idea is a bad one. This is what doesn't work within democratic liberal ideals. This is why this doesn't match a liberal ideal. Let's fix that. And even like I've done stuff behind the scenes when a state was looking at adopting a red flag law. I worked with somebody else outside of our organization, but who invited me and who said, hey, the Democratic governor really wants a red flag law. Can you talk with the chief of staff and another person involved in kind of making this law, framing what they want so that they understand the problem with these laws? Where are the liberal concerns about red flag laws? And so we went in and we talked to them about, how these are used, what's bad, what's the problem they're really trying to solve versus what these laws actually do, that kind of thing. And so we have that credibility and we try to keep that up. And we work really hard, and it makes it difficult because there's groups that we just frankly don't publicly affiliate with because we can't and keep the credibility with the people we need to reach. We can get into the rooms where other people don't get into, and so we try to keep the credibility for that.
Right. Now, so all these new gun owners that have come up recently, what I guess, what is your message to try to appeal to them? How do you guys, if someone's listening now who maybe feels out of place somewhere like the NRA or any of the other gun groups, but they still want to get involved in both a shooting community, but also political advocacy. What's your message to people like that?
Our message is we're there. We've been doing this a long time. We're one of the more established groups. Not only do we have the advocacy side, but we do have the fun side and the serious training side. If you have bought a gun and you have a spouse who really hates it, come talk to us about it. We've all been, well, not me, but I'm the one that my spouse got me into shooting, but numerous ones of our members have been through that. We have lots of trans members. We have lots of gay members. We have lots of members who are in marginalized communities of all types. We have people who understand that and understand the particular concerns to different communities who will talk to you about that. You're not going to be talked down to because you're new. You might get so much information you're not sure what to do with it, but we're going to give you all the help we can possibly give you. And we're going to do it in a way that we want you to feel comfortable and safe. If you are looking for an instructor and you live somewhere that we don't have an instructor, we'll get someone to you. Even if we have to do online training with you. So let's say you're a spouse whose spouse bought a gun and you really hate this. Come talk to me or come talk to us. We actually have a training for non-gun owners about make it safe, about what do you do if there's a firearm in your home that you need to make safe, not in an immediate danger type of situation, not if someone is pointing it at you, but you find a gun in your teenager's room. You live in a neighborhood that's not safe and you find, a firearm unsecured and you cannot call the police for whatever reason. We can teach you that. We can do it on video. We have a whole lecture series for that kind of thing. But we also have lots of fun. Do you want to come talk about all kinds of issues? We have a Discord channel that has channels for everything. We have gun pets. We have, the pub channel, which is what everybody's having for dinner. We have a book club. We have, which is really interesting because a lot of the books are actually books. We have a ton of authors as members. So we read members' books, like things they've written, which are not gun books, and they're all kinds of things. We have, we're a big, broad community to come talk to and learn from, but also interact with and hopefully make friends. And, we want everyone to feel comfortable. And we do understand. I mean, I found the group because when I started shooting, I was looking for a community to learn from. And I found one of just the most notoriously terrible gun groups through a Google search. I mean, really one that's known for being truly awful, even in the gun world. And I went, oh God, maybe I don't want to do this. And then I started Googling and I found out that the club existed, and it was much, much smaller at the time. But come talk to us. If you are not feeling comfortable, if you want to know, how do I handle my local gun store who has Nazi paraphernalia? How do you guys handle that? Because unfortunately, that's out there. Who do you guys buy from? Who do you use as an FFL? All those kind of questions. How do you as a member, how do you as a woman or a trans person? I went to my local gun shop and I felt really uncomfortable. What do I do? We have all of that for you. We've all, we can supply you with so many people that can talk to you about that. And we, but we're also going to go have fun at the range. We'll invite you out to a great fun day. We want everybody to have fun but we want everybody to be safe too.
Right. And so where can people, find out more about the Liberal Gun Club?
So our primary public facing spaces are our webpage, which is theliberalgunclub.com, and on Facebook under the Liberal Gun Club. And you'll find a lot of stuff there. You can message us on Facebook. We have an Instagram. There's not as much on there. So the two best places to get in touch with us are either through the webpage or through Facebook.
All right. And if you go to thereload.com, you can pick up a membership to our site as well. I believe we actually have a discount for Liberal Gun Club members too. Yep. That's still active. So feel free to head over and join us as well. But we really appreciate you taking the time to explain the group, explain your philosophy, your point of view, why you're different, why that's important and matters. And we look forward to hearing more from you in the future.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing you again. And if anybody really wants to reach out, you can message me through the Facebook page if you want to know more about our group. If you want to know more about who I am happy to talk. Personally, happy to talk with anybody, especially on the other side. How do you own guns and stay liberal? I'm happy to talk to you about that. I'm happy to go out and talk about that. I'll be at GRPC this year. If people want to,
I'm sure there'll be plenty of people who on the conservative side who will try to convince you to own guns and then become conservative too.
there's a very prominent professional shooter who, when I met him, said to me, and he said, "Oh, you're a liberal. Don't worry. Come spend a weekend with us. We'll change that." And it was like, no, but thank you. I appreciate it. And it wasn't done maliciously. And it was really funny because it was like, okay, thanks.
All right. Well, we're going to head over to the news update now, but we'll have you on again sometime in the future, I think.
I appreciate you having us on. Thank you so much.
All right. I'm joined by Jake Fogelman, our contributing writer, for another news update segment. How you doing, Jake?
I'm great, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing all right. You had a update on the NRA situation this week. Actually, we both did, but we should start with yours. The New York Attorney General has filed a new complaint in the NRA case in New York, right?
That's right. Yeah. Letitia James is back in court after, if you guys will recall, a month ago, a New York judge actually dismissed her biggest weapon against the NRA when, excuse me, he said that her attempt to dissolve the group was dismissed. That wasn't going to happen. Her accusations didn't warrant such a sweeping penalty against the organization. And so they no longer could be dissolved. So she's back in court. She amended her complaint to include a couple new penalties now. And it essentially amounts to appointing 2 court-appointed positions that would essentially oversee the NRA's operations and monitor their finances going forward. So definitely not dissolving the NRA, but still new penalties for the organization.
Yeah, that's a pretty significant change to the organization, of course. And those overseers, they would report back to not just the court, right, but also Letitia James herself.
Right, especially that's called an independent compliance monitor in the complaint. And essentially what it would be appointed by the court and it would report to the court. But as you pointed out, it would also directly report to Letitia James herself, which is obviously, if you're someone in the NRA, that's not something you're interested in. It's someone that's very clearly expressed hostility towards you, having a direct line to the person that is overseeing your financials. So that's a
right.
possible
And
stiff penalty.
Yeah, there's still a lot of questions about exactly how that sort of arrangement would work out.
Right.
We'll have to see if we can find more details on exactly what that would look like in practice. But those weren't the only punishments, right? They're the only sanctions that she suggested. There's also, I guess, individual punishments against Wayne LaPierre and some of the other members of leadership that are named in the suit.
That's right. So in the previous proceeding, when the dissolution claim got dismissed, the judge actually allowed her individualized punishments towards Wayne LaPierre and John Fraser and some of the other individual defendants to go forward. And so they show up again here in this complaint where she's essentially calling for LaPierre, Fraser to be permanently barred from, or first removed from their position in the NRA, and then permanently barred from ever being elected again to hold an officer or director position in the NRA, as well as they have to pay financial restitution to the organization. Some of the other defendants that are no longer with the NRA currently would be barred from serving in any nonprofit at all in the state of New York. So pretty stiff individual punishments as well. Yeah,
and I mean that financial restitution, I mean, they'd have to pay back all the sort of excess benefits that they received over the years from the NRA by charging personal expenses to the group, and any funds they misdirected as well, I believe. So that could be, I mean, it could be millions of dollars, I believe.
If she's able to prove all of her corruption claims in this civil suit, that would be millions of dollars. That would be a very big financial restitution.
Yeah. Yeah, and it would get paid back to the NRA, somewhat interestingly, which is actually part of the argument that you saw in the NRA lawyers in one of their responses was basically, and the judge sort of agreed with this when he dismissed the dissolution case, but their argument was like the people who, if these allegations are true, which the NRA's lawyers obviously don't believe they are, but if they're true, then the people who were actually harmed were NRA members, not the attorney general or the people of New York generally. So they'd actually have to pay all this money back to the NRA, not to Letitia James's office or anything like that. So that's sort of an interesting wrinkle, but certainly that's a big development now where we're seeing what she wants to do in lieu of shutting down the organization, as that's no longer an option for her. And I think that's where the battle's going to be now, is over these punishments, over this idea of taking the NRA out of the hands of the elected directors and officers and putting it into the hands of a court-appointed director, which obviously with all the corruption allegations is a logical conclusion if you believe that they've proven their case. But if not, then it's certainly concerning. But we also saw some other news about the NRA, who sort of got two big pieces of news in a row towards the end of this week, with a new challenge to Wayne LaPierre's leadership from the inside.
I was going to say, yeah, you wrote a piece. It's fitting that, in one proceeding, they're talking about potentially removing leadership. And you've just covered a new development about people who would like to see fill that void if there's a gap in leadership. Yeah.
Or, it seems almost like what they want to do is stave off this consequence that the New York Attorney General is putting on the table. They want to remove leadership before the court can do it, in sort of an attempt to countermand this idea from Letitia James that the NRA is not fixing its own problems, that they haven't done any meaningful reforms, because obviously Wayne LaPierre is still in charge of the NRA, and he's the one who's mainly accused of all this corruption. And so these dissidents, you got a current board member in Philip Journey, you got and then two former board members in I forget the name.
Bill Daley
and Rocky Marshall are now trying to get Alan West, who is also a former NRA director, he was on the board of directors, to run against LaPierre. Now, Alan West is obviously a very well-known figure, a prominent Republican a politician who has also been highly regarded inside of the NRA, and with membership, they want him to challenge Wayne LaPierre, which is interesting. This is like their third attempt to try and oust Wayne LaPierre, but it might be more. This one might have more legs than some of the other ones.
Well, especially because it's running concurrently with, as you said, this developing lawsuit where now that the dissolution is off the table, the target kind of shrinks and it's just on leadership now. The focus is just on leadership. So it is kind of an interesting time to suggest, as you pointed out, a prominent person that's been involved with the organization. He's well known in at least Republican politics. He was a former congressman from Texas. He tried to run for the governor of Texas unsuccessfully just this last primary. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting development to see. I'm not sure how successful they'll be, but it's certainly interesting to see them try to head off this corruption accusation by just cleaning house, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, this is something they've been trying. This group of directors, current and former, have been trying to do for a couple of years now,
right? And
they haven't had much success. They tried to intervene in the bankruptcy to get a court-appointed examiner to look at the NRA's finances, as sort of a third-party independent audit, essentially. And then they tried to intervene in the New York case, as Rocky Marshall did, at least as a director, which was denied. And then now they also put up Rocky Marshall as to run against Wayne LaPierre in the last leadership election, which, by the way, leadership elections in the NRA are decided by the board of directors, not by the membership. The membership votes on the board of directors, and then the board of directors decides who gets to be, the officers of the NRA, the executive vice president, the first vice president, second vice president, and so forth, the general counsel. But the interesting thing here, to me at least, is one, Alan West seems open to the idea. He told us he was he'd be praying with and consulting his family before he decides, but that he was humbled by the request. So he seems certainly interested in potentially doing this. He's also been vocally critical of Wayne and other leadership over these corruption allegations in the past. In 2019, the last time they had an annual meeting, during the members' meeting, there was a lot of uproar. It was very contentious. Some members tried to vote through a proposal to oust leadership back then, because that's when all these corruption allegations first came to light in public. That failed, but it created a lot of internal dissension. You had Oliver North, the president at the time, effectively at war with Wayne LaPierre. He ended up being ousted, and LaPierre ended up winning that. But Alan West was vocal at that time, called for Wayne to resign, called other members of leadership, a cabal who was corrupt. So, he certainly has the, passion about this situation, the NRA, to make this happen. Of course, he later left the board when he ran for governor, and did so pretty quietly. He didn't make any announcements. So after that 2016, outburst, the noise he made then, he kind of disengaged, I think, a bit from at least publicly talking about all the issues the NRA has. But I wouldn't be surprised if he got back in to contest this leadership election at the end of the month. It's actually, so the annual meeting is happening the end of this month. May 27th is when it starts. The board meeting is the day after the last day of the annual meeting. So that'll be, I believe it's Monday, May 30th. It's either the 30th or the 31st. And it's going to be perhaps pretty big deal. I mean, you have his notoriety both publicly and on the board, but you also have the fact that the NRA's leadership has had some hard times lately with both the suit, and then also the financial situation. The NRA is pretty dire right now.
Yeah.
We published, of course, last year a detailed internal document that showed their revenue has been cut in half from what it was in 2018, and their spending has been cut even further. So they're kind of they're in pretty bad shape, and so maybe that has an impact on these other directors, however many show up, because even though they have 76 members, a lot of those people don't even show up to these board meetings.
Right.
So that's Wayne. That previous leadership election, where Rocky Marshall was put up to run against Wayne, Rocky Marshall only got 2 votes, right? Which sounds really bad in terms of like the prospects of replacing Wayne. Because clearly, if Marshall only got 2 votes, well, Wayne must have gotten 74 votes then, right? Well, there were 3 abstentions. So, all right, well, so he got 71 votes. No, he got 44 votes because a large chunk of the directors didn't show up to the last major board meeting where they had that vote. So, there's certainly room there in theory for somebody like Alan West to come in and campaign among the board members and persuade them at this juncture to change leadership. But I would still imagine, I don't know, what do you think? I still imagine Wayne has most of the board locked down.
I was going to say, I would imagine that as well. But you do raise a good point that, there's multi-year litigation now, multiple years of financial trouble that we've uncovered 2 years in a row for 2 years of financial documents. You have a guy like Alan West that you said has at least previously been willing to raise concerns and vocally express those concerns. It'll be interesting to see if between now and the next meeting, if he's willing to get vocal like that again. You know, he privately said to us that he was considering it. But I believe he also just took a position with that new group that I think Trump's kid started about the Second Amendment. I think he took some position. I'm sure it was just like an advisory role. So I don't know if that's, I mean, the NRA is obviously a bigger deal than that, but if he's maybe not willing to go to bat quite so hard to replace the leadership of the NRA, it will be interesting to see. That's, you know.
That new group from Trump Jr. is, I mean, it's not really clear what it actually even is.
Right.
You know, I've looked at the website and the reporting on it. It doesn't seem to be a nonprofit. I'm not really sure what it actually is or what it does, but you know, that's another potential player to compete with the NRA. So we'll definitely keep an eye on it once we get some more details on what they actually do. But yeah, I think the NRA's situation is heating up now. You know, we haven't really talked about them very much the last couple of months, and now the annual meeting seems like it's certainly going to happen this time. You know, they had to cancel the last two, but it seems like there's going to be a leadership fight. We'll see what happens. We'll see if West takes that reign and tries to oust Wayne. That rhymed. I didn't mean it to, but you're welcome. You know, perhaps we could get Alan on the show. We'll see. And it'd be interesting to see what he would actually do differently from Wayne. You know, it's one thing to oust Wayne, but it's another thing to actually fix what the issues that the NRA has and get out of this lawsuit. Is getting rid of Wayne going to actually accomplish that?
Right.
And how would it, you know, if West does do that? So we'll see. We'll keep on track of that, keep on top of it. But I think that's it for this week. We are another successful podcast in the books. Thank you again, Jake, for coming on to give us the news update. And we'll see you guys next week. But, you know, in the meantime, you should head on over to thereload.com, pick up a membership today if you want to get exclusive access to hundreds of analysis and story, you know, news pieces that we've done for our members only. You know, you can also get this podcast a day early, or even come and appear on the show. We actually need to do another members segment. It's been a couple episodes. I really enjoyed doing those. So we'll have to find some more members who want to come on and share their story as well. But if you like this show, please, you know, if you listen this far, you probably like it. Please go ahead and rate and review the show on your favorite podcasting app. That really helps us get out there to more people, helps more people hear this show, helps us grow, helps us expand our operations. And, you know, in the future, we want to hire more people and do more reporting for you guys. But until next week, we'll thank you for joining and listening.